As we continue through the Bible, let's take a look at Exodus 16 through 18. This is a period where the Israelites have now exited from Egypt, and they are now in the wilderness, headed towards Mount Sinai. We encounter this first narrative where God provides manna and quail for the Israelites to sustain them through the desert. And this miracle is going to sustain them the entire time that they are in the wilderness. This miracle isn't often mentioned too much after this, but we do get references to it that lead us to believe that this miracle is sustaining them the entire time that they are in the wilderness, all the way through Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And we see very quickly the character of the people of Israel. They have just departed from Egypt, and they are already grumbling against the Lord. They're asking, why didn't you just kill us in Egypt? Why are you going to draw out our deaths in the desert? So Moses and Aaron tell the people of Israel that God has heard them, and he is going to send meat for them in the evening and bread for them in the morning. And suddenly the Spirit of the Lord appears in a cloud for all of Israel to see. And God says, through this miracle you will see that I am the God who brought you out of Egypt. So in the evening, God sent quail, and then in the morning, there was a layer of dew that turned into some sort of flaky bread on the ground. And they called it manna, which sounds like the Hebrew word for, what is it? They had no idea what it was, but they knew that there was enough to sustain them. Everyone was instructed to take about 3 pounds each, and it would be enough to sustain them. Whether they gathered a lot or gathered a little would be enough to sustain them for the day. But the people of Israel became greedy. They wanted more than just what was there to sustain them. So they began to gather twice as much. And anything that was left over turned maggoty. It began to rot. But God turns their selfishness on its head. He says, you are going to save half of what you have collected for the 7th day. For 6 days, you are to collect however much will sustain you. But on the 6th day, you will collect double. Now you're going to collect double. And on the 7th day, you will eat what was left over from the 6th day. And in this half miracle, half punishment, God does not send any manna on the 7th day. That day is a Sabbath day where the people would rest. And even when people went out to go and try to collect more, they couldn't find any. And so God says to Moses, why are you doing this to me? Why won't you listen to me? And he's not chastising Moses specifically. The Hebrew word here is actually plural. And so what he's saying is, why are y'all not listening to me? So God is saying, how long will y'all refuse to listen to my commands? But what commands are we talking about here? We even see that God says to preserve some of the manna, and Moses tells Aaron to store it with the covenant. Specifically, he says in verse 34, put the manna with the tablets of the covenant law so that it might be preserved. If you've been in the church world for some time, then you'll know that this is a reference to the 10 Commandments. But we're only in Exodus 16. The 10 Commandments have not been written yet. In fact, nothing has been written yet. You see, when we think about reading a history book, we like to have the events in chronological order. When we look at ancient Hebrew writing, chronological order comes secondary, oftentimes, to poetry. Specifically, we're looking at a type of literary structure called a chiasm. And we see this sometimes in particular paragraphs of a text where the top of the paragraph will mirror the bottom of the paragraph, and in the center is what the most important thing is. But in this case, we are forming the beginning of an immense chiasm that leads all the way up to Mount Sinai and then all the way down out of Sinai in the book of Numbers. We're going to continue to explore that as we journey through the Bible, but I want to point this out here because this sets a tone for us, a tone that we should be aware of, that we are not reading in the same way that we read our modern 21st century American history books, but we're reading in a different way, and we need to read through a different lens. And so looking at something out of order like this should not scare us, but should point us to something. When we start chapter 17, we can see that the miracles of Exodus 16 are short-lived. The people of Israel are once again grumbling. They say, "We have no water to drink," which, to be fair, is a valid concern. But they begin to quarrel with Moses and ask, "Why would you lead us out here just to have us die of thirst?" And so Moses cries out to God and he says, "Strike this rock." And God provides water for the people to drink as another sign that he is there to sustain them. In verse 8, a group of Amalekites come and attack the Israelites. And Moses sends Joshua out with a group of men to go fight them. And as Joshua is fighting them, Moses raises his staff. And whenever Moses' staff is raised, then the Israelites are winning. When his staff begins to fall, the Israelites begin to lose. And with a little bit of help, Moses succeeds and Joshua succeeds, and God protects the people of Israel. And this is the first time that we see God tell someone to write something down. In verse 14, God says to Moses, "Write this down as something to be remembered." Because God protected the people of Israel against the Amalekites, and he's not going to forget what they tried to do to his people. And then in chapter 18, Moses gets a visit from his father-in-law, Jethro, who's a priest of Midian. And the Midianites descend from Abraham. So it's a little bit uncertain whether or not Jethro followed God. With Jethro is Moses' wife Zipporah and their 2 sons. And we get this interesting phrase that Moses had sent away his wife. Some scholars say this could refer to divorce. I think it would make a pretty epic narrative if Moses is going into Egypt to face Pharaoh and kind of in an action movie sort of sense, he says, "Stay here, it's not safe." And then his family comes and meets up with him later. We're a little unsure of what exactly happened here, but nonetheless, Moses is reunited with his family. And Moses begins to recount the tales of everything that God has done for them so far. Moses is essentially sharing his testimony, and Jethro decides that he is going to follow the one true God, Yahweh. Based off of what he says in verse 11, again, it's uncertain whether he followed Yahweh or not, but at the very least, he knows now that Yahweh is elevated above all other gods. Jethro then shadows Moses as he goes about his regular duties leading the people of Israel, and he notices that this is kind of a lot for one person to handle. So he recommends that Moses take more of a role of a teacher and implement a system where others can handle smaller disputes, and only the largest disputes will come to Moses so that he can focus more on communing with God and leading the people. So Moses agrees, and he implements a structure where some lead thousands of people, others lead hundreds, some 50s, and others 10s. And then just as suddenly as he arrived, Jethro returns home. So as we wrap up this narrative of Exodus chapter 16 to 18, I want to share a breakdown of this chiasm. This is from Dr. Carmen Ives. She does an incredible Exodus series for the Bible Project, and it shows just how in-depth this chiasm or this mirror goes, because the events that happen in Exodus are mirrored by the events that happen in Numbers, with the Sinai narratives at the middle. We've already seen God have a showdown with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, with the 10 plagues. We see that the angel of the Lord protected them through Passover. We saw Miriam and Moses sing this song of victory of Yahweh over Pharaoh and praising Yahweh. And then Yahweh provides them with water in the wilderness. Then we see a combination of passages where God provides manna and quail for the Israelites in the wilderness. God institutes the Sabbath, and the people are rebelling against Moses. And God also provides water from a rock. Then we see Joshua's battle with the Amalekites. We see some sort of potential conflict with Moses and his wife. Then we see that Moses feels burdened by his leadership, and he's assisted by his family member, Jethro. And this all leads up to the Israelites' arrival at Sinai, which we're going to talk about in our next video.